Hello and welcome to That Squirrel Speaks. Today is Thursday, April 20th. It's episode 195. How are you? I'm Amy Beth, also known as the Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. That's me. Okay. Yeah. How are you? I just realized my glasses are really dirty, and like you can't see that unless you're watching a giant TV. Don't do that. I see occasionally on like Instagram. I mean, you can do that. I don't care. I see occasionally on Instagram or someplace people like watching the show and on like a giant television, and I'm just like, holy frijoles! Nature did not intend my face to be that big in anybody's house or anywhere, quite frankly. But anyway, okay. Oh, that's better. Ta-da! Okay, so this week's episode will contain knitting. It will contain shameless self-promotion. It will contain some shenanigans. And I think that's all it'll contain. Yeah, so, okay, so let's do this first. We'll do From the Boards. And so, actually, Gypsy Mama 986 asked a couple of episodes ago that if I was going to make a gift bag or like a welcome to the knitting world, homemade, the neighborhood's great here, gift for somebody, what would I put in it? Which I thought was a really fun question because, yeah, like when you start to knit, you just kind of accumulate these little bits and bobs over time. And, sorry, my husband's playing a video game, so I'm hoping that none of it transfers onto this, but if it does, I apologize. Oh, and so knitting, we all know, like, is a not inexpensive hobby, right? It is pricey, and especially when you're starting off, like, because, you have to buy a new needle every time you buy a project, or, buy yarn for a new project, because unless you're just knitting the same thing, which most knitters don't do after the first one or two projects, it becomes very cost prohibitive. So when you add on these little like notion-y bits and bobs, it becomes even more exorbitantly expensive. And so I feel like for me, I didn't buy any of that like extra notion-y stuff until like maybe started buying that stuff 5 years ago. I had a tape measure and a needle gauge, and that was it. And like literally you have to have those two things. But like I used yarn for stitch markers, which is great because you can get away with a lot of stuff. But if you want to like, again, welcome to the block, then these are the things I think would be fun. I think it would be fun to, and again, I'm not putting like a price limit on this or anything. I'm just doing like, ideasies. Okay? Okay. But I thought it would be fun to get them like a needle sampler. Right? Like you could include your favorite needle and maybe, just like a slightly different, not slightly different, but like my favorite needles are ChowGoo red laces. So I could put like some of those in there. I really like carbons for double points. So I could put some of those in there and then maybe throw in like a bamboo or something like that as like in case they don't like metal, but then get some like different types and then that you get them different sizes. So at least like if anything else, like, and like in a common starter size, like in 5s or 8s or something like that. So it would be great if they could do a project and not have to buy a new set of needles. Ding. But also just give them exposure to different kinds of needles and see what's out there. Because certainly, like, it's bad enough when you buy a new set of needles and you pay for them, but then if you don't like them and you have to buy another lot, or, you just, like, slog through the thing, then maybe you won't love knitting quite as much as you potentially could. So that's one thing I would like to put in my Welcome to the Knitting Neighborhood basket. And then, of course, a needle gauge, because, like, you do have to have that. And tape measures like that. But I guess I'm going beyond like the basics of this one, but another thing that would be good is wool wash. Right. So you could give them some soak, and like soak does those little bottles too, like, right? I've never used soak, but it's very popular and people seem to love the way it smells. Or like Eucalyptus or something, so you could give them a couple, so you could even do like a sampler of that. You give them a couple different things, like a Tuft Woolens bar, things like that. And I think, Martha, I think sometimes does samples of Tuft Woolens. But I can't remember for sure if that's a regular thing. I don't think that's a regular thing that she does. But anyway, just give them like a couple of different scents or options for wool wash, because I also did not buy wool wash until, yeah, like 5 years ago. You can totally use shampoo. You don't have to use wool wash, by the way. Like, shampoo works. Sheep hair is hair. Shampoo's fine. Just saying. Never heard anything that I made. But as a gift. And then a pair of good scissors, because I don't know, when I started, I always just used whatever scissors were around, and again, that's totally fine. But if you get like a little pair of sharps, like embroidery scissors or something like that, that they can fit in an ocean bag or something like that, that's just like a nice treat, so they don't have to be hunting for scissors and things like that. And then of course the next thing is some sort of, but anyway, a lot of bag makers make like a notions bag or things like that. Or you could just get like, there are those little, you find like a little zipper bag, like a makeup bag or something. But you should totally buy a handmade one, okay? Or make it yourself, yo. Right. And then a project bag. Totally shameless self-promotion. But really, that's actually a great thing. Because how many of us put our knitting in Ziploc bags, like, and still do sometimes? Okay, I don't anymore because, hi, that's my job. But I did forever until it was my job. It didn't even occur to me that there was a thing as such as a project bag. Like, not even remotely. I had like a basket that I bought at Pier 1 and put some napkins in to like put my knitting in. Yeah, that was actually really cute. I was in college, yo. Whatever. That basket of knitting got me through lots of episodes of Murder, She Wrote, people. It's a good knitting basket. Anyway. Actually, it was a terrible knitting basket. It was like made with a really big gauge reed or whatever, and so it would catch on everything. But whatever was what I had. So yeah, project bag, and then you get that like all in its like nested glory, right? It's already wrapped in the project bag. It's like a thing. So like, yay! Welcome to the block. I want stitch markers. I put that down, but I forgot to tell you that. Like cutesy ones and something that they like. Okay, I'm just saying. Or if you don't want to get cutesy ones, because yeah, sometimes, I guess that's true. Sometimes when you're a new knitter, like the larger stitch markers can kind of get stuck into your knitting, and you might not know how to deal with that as a new knitter. So maybe just like the simple ones. But one thing I really liked when I was a not new knitter, but newly discovered knitter was row counter stitch markers, where it's like 10 little loops of something, so that you could, because you don't know how to read your knitting right at first, and some of us still don't, but those little, so that she can count her, or she or he can count her rows. So that might be a nice thing too to put in with the stitch markers. But anyway, so those are just some ideas. I thought that was a great question. Thanks so much, Gypsy Mama 986. I feel the intense need to tell you that I'm starving. It is 3:15. Why have I not eaten yet? That was dumb. We're gonna keep going. I don't know why I feel like I have to tell you. Are you hungry too? Or you have something good for lunch? I hope it's delicious. I have no idea what I'm gonna eat. That's probably why I haven't eaten yet. Okay, so I'm sorry, we're gonna keep going on. Okay, so then in the last thread, episode 194's thread, who was it? GJD asked about stretchiness of rib. She specifically was working on a 7x1 rib sock, and I last time showed these socks, which are now finished, which are a 6x2 rib. If you recall from last time, I started out doing a Skype, it's not really Skype, it's SKYP, but whatever, pattern, but the twisted stitch that happens it's basically a 6x2 with like a twisted stitch in the middle. That you do every other row. It's a free pattern, back down. But it didn't really show up well with this colorway, and so it's actually quite tedious to do that every other row if it doesn't make a nice effect. So I just dropped it and went to a 6x2 rib, and so she was asking again, 7x1 versus 6x2. Is there a huge difference? Not really, but there's more elastic. The closer you get to 1x1 rib, the more elastic your fabric will be. So theoretically, 1x1 is the most elastic, because anytime you transfer from a knit to a purl stitch or vice versa, you gain elasticity. This is not science. This is what I think. And things I've heard. Okay, so this is just my understanding. I completely will stand corrected if I am wrong. Don't feel like you can't bring up that I'm wrong. Sometimes I say things with authority, and I'm not trying to trick you. That's just my default. But anyway, so 1 by 1 rib. For example, when you change from a knit stitch to a purl stitch, my shawl that's I'm going to show you totally has briars in it. Anyway, when you switch from a knit to a purl stitch, right, your yarn is coming from the back of the work to the front of the work and around a stitch and back to the back of the work again. So the amount of yarn that's consumed by that purl stitch is greater than it would be if it were, for example, a knit stitch. And that's, from what I understand, where your elasticity comes from. Does that make sense, right? You're adding in, keeping a nice looking gauge, but you're adding in extra length so that can stretch further. So each time you do that, switching from knit to purl, that's where you gain your elasticity. So 1 by 1 rib is the most elastic. And then basically it just diverges, like if it's like a number line and 1 by 1 rib is in the middle, and then 2 by 2, and then I don't know how 1 by 3 versus 2 by 2. I guess 1 by 2 would be more elastic than 2 by 2. Yeah, because you're adding more knits or the other way, adding more purls and less knits, like transferring those two. So 6 by 2 versus 7 by 1. It's not a huge difference, but there should be some difference in elasticity. Obviously, you could just knit a swatch and stretch them and see what the difference is. I don't think it would be that noticeable on something as small as a sock. Now, if you're doing like a sweater, then that might be a significant difference, because obviously you're compounding the number of purls in those elasticity. Birds are like going bongo. Can you hear them? I have to have all the windows open because it's like 80 something degrees today. Excuse me. And I had to turn on the fan, so I'm like, Anyway. So thanks for that. That was a good question, I thought. Yay! And then one more thing. Oh, at some point we talked about the Finding Richard Simmons podcast, and it has since concluded. If you have not watched it and want to watch it, this won't specifically contain spoilers, but it might be spoilery. I'm going to just talk very briefly about it. Because I feel like I've seen in lots of different places people feeling conflicted about, just people feeling conflicted about their enjoyment of the podcast or just its content in general. And so some people feel like, and specifically Beth Chiff, is that what I wrote down correctly? I hope so. She said she watched, I think, 1 or 2 episodes, but then suddenly felt like it started to feel very intrusive, and that she felt uncomfortable about it. And I've heard that from a lot of different people, so like that's a very common reaction. And I understand why anybody would have that reaction. I didn't feel like, for me, it didn't feel intrusive. How I approached it didn't feel intrusive. Like I wasn't looking to do this. I was just like, And so maybe just the intent I came to it clouded how, or made me less objective about how it could feel intrusive. And I certainly can feel how that would feel intrusive. And then another thing, somebody posted an article, and I apologize, I can't remember where that was from, but the article talked about the motivations of the producers of the show. And to be completely frank, I just never even thought about that. This is a profit-making piece of material. This is not necessarily pure journalism just for the sake of journalism, I guess. That's probably not the best way to phrase that. But to be completely frank, I had just never thought about that. I had never really thought about the motivations of the producer, and that's a fault on my part that I didn't dig deeper in how I was viewing that. And so that certainly compounds the question of, is it intrusive? Was this done for profit? Was it, and so that kind of clouds the whole thing further. So yeah, I would be very interested to see how other people felt about it, and what they took away from it. I feel like what I took away from it and what I experienced it as was more of, I want to say anthropological, but that's rather more intellectual than what it was. But just like a people watching experience, for lack of a better term. People are fascinating, right? Lots of people are pretty fascinating. Celebrity certainly doesn't make anybody more fascinating. But I thought what was interesting about it and what I enjoyed about it was the nostalgia part of it was very interesting. Like, because you remember that Deal a Meal commercial from when you were like 8 or whatever. And then, like, that had some weird connotations with it. Because I was like a fat 8-year-old who thought maybe she would ask for Deal a Meal for like Christmas or something. So, like, that was like all murky. And so, maybe as a fat woman, I also have like conflicting feelings about this, because whether or not the producer of this podcast had profit in mind, Mr. Richard Simmons certainly made a lot of money off some fat people. And I don't mean that he did that malicious. I'm not saying that there's any sort of negative connotation about that. That is just the reality of what happened. He made a lot of money off people who felt really awful about themselves because they were not a size 4 or whatever. I'm sure he made some money off of people who were, but do you know what I mean? Like, he made money off of the fact that we all are living inside an engine that tells us that what we are is not okay. So maybe that makes me feel more callous towards him, and I don't mean in any sort of tangible way, just like in a subconscious way. Maybe that's one of the reasons it didn't feel more victim-y. Like, he didn't feel as victim-y to me as he might have felt to some other people. No, it is very interesting. Again, there's like so many. It brings up a lot of really interesting points, like not only about like how our approach to celebrity has changed, like in terms of like pre-internet world versus post-internet world, but again, it's got all of this crazy tie-ins to being fat in America, being a woman in America, and what that contributes to your vision. And I understand, like, this man, like, he helped a lot of people, or think that was really, I do really feel like that was his motivation, was to help people. I don't feel like he used people in any sort of, I feel like it was, I think it was of pure intent on his part. Again, this is just my opinion. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to paint him as somebody who, willingly contributed to this system that really oppresses a lot of people. But I will say, when you are making money off of people who have been just torn up and chewed up and spit out by a culture who hates them, and they don't think they have access to people who care about them in a real way, when you target people like that, and again, not necessarily maliciously, but when you are making your money from people like that, when you are putting your energy into projects for those people, the reality is they're going to glom onto you. And that doesn't make it okay that that's what they're doing, but I feel like it's the only expectable outcome of what's happening. So, I don't know. I have lots of like conflicting, and I don't have anybody human to talk it about with. So I haven't been able to like develop my ideas about it, or to bounce them off other people and have them say, well, no, that's why that's crazy thought. So I would, it'd be interesting to have in the discussion thread of this episode, or if somebody wants to start a new thread, whatever you feel comfortable with, then we should start a new thread. If I don't remember to do it, you do it. You. Thanks. And we can see what other people think about it. I don't know. Okay, so moving on. I also probably should have prepared my thoughts about that before we started recording, but whatever, it's been a busy week. Okay, so then now we're done with boards. Let's move on to shenanigans. So this last weekend was the Fiber event in Greencastle, Indiana. And its name is slightly more intense than it actually is. However, it was the first Fiber festival I ever attended after I learned to spin, and it was amazing to me, the first time especially. It's at a fairgrounds in Indiana. It's like a normal sized small, like not a state fairgrounds, it's a normal sized county fairgrounds, and it's basically two fairground sized buildings filled with vendors. There's some outside vendors. This year apparently there were people shearing sheep, but I somehow did not see that. No, how did you miss that? But whatever, I did apparently. So it's very enjoyable, and it's nice to see people, even though I don't know them at all, vendors and stuff. There's one little vendor who has rabbits, and I've bought needle felted things from her over the last several years. She didn't have one this year. I wasn't kind of disappointed. I was deeply disappointed. She didn't have one for me. Not for me, but one that I needed. But so she's a very young woman, and just seeing her there is like, oh, she's still doing her thing, and yay! And it's just exciting to see people doing their thing, and so all of that. But so it was lovely. I purchased some Joanna, who is Knit Spin Farm on Etsy. I tried to purchase this bag, and then she was like, no, let me give that to you, friend. I was like, oh, please, Joanna. So she insisted. She's far too generous. But oh my gosh, because I can't help that, right? What am I going to do? I need that so bad. I can't not have that. And unlike buying spinning fiber, I buy this and I don't have to do any more work to it. I get to enjoy it immediately. I don't have to have it on my shelf and looming at me and being like, why haven't you done it yet? No, it's already done. Yay, thanks. So I bought that, and then I also purchased, I guess I could put these socks down. I went with the intent, I had a gradient set from Leading Men Fiber Arts, which was the blue steel gradient, and part of it's wound and part of it's not, because I originally thought I would, well, not originally, a few weeks ago I thought I would make I was really churning in my brain how to make a snow melt cowl that was like Lady Bluebird inspired. It just was not working for me. But having gotten it out, I was like, I need to make something with this. So I decided I wanted to do the Buccaneer. And I apologize, I don't know. We live very near the fire station. I don't know who did that pattern, but I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes. But it's the Buccaneer. And it requires a 5 or 6 color set of minis, gradient, or whatever. In fact, the ones I like the best are actually just mixy matchy colors, which they're very fun. But so I wanted to it requires 2 skeins of the main color. So I found these, which is black walnut on their showcase base, which is 490 yards of 100% superwash merino. So I think that'll be really fun. I got 2 skeins of this one. And that's what I got. We also got some kettle corn, which was highly salted. Oh, and I got some soap. And I got a shawl pin for my mom. I didn't remember to show you those things. Oh my gosh, though. The kettle corn was so salty. So disappointing. Crushed. Oh well. That's much kettle corn I didn't eat, so that's not terrible. So then after that, again, Joanna with her silly what is that? Generous. I was trying to say gratitude, but that's not the right word. That's my word, not the word for her. Not that it's not the word for her, but you know what I mean. Her crazy generous self invited a bunch of folks up after the fiber event to have pizza and cuddle farm animals at her house. So I actually took my kiddo to the fiber thing, even though she wasn't super into it. But she was fine. And then we went up to Joanna's from there, and it was awesome. I will say this, perhaps don't visit super awesome humans with a super awesome farm who are doing super awesome things while you are hormonally subjective. That's not the right word. While you are easily influenced by your hormonal fluxes at the moment. Super awesome. We got to visit all the goats. Tova had so much fun. She was looking forward to it for quite some time to get to snuggle some goats, and the goats climbed on her, which she really enjoyed. She got to hold the goat. She got to chase a goat and then catch, and she likes to try to catch chickens. That's actually what she had talked about most about going to Joanna's, was catching chickens, even though I tried to really discourage, not in a mean way, but just in a positive, supportive other actions way. And maybe also saying that if her chasing of chickens required chickens to go to the veterinarian, that she would be financially responsible for those actions. They're not our chickens, kid. Anyway, so she'd been looking forward to that part. So at one point during the evening, I asked her if she had caught a chicken, and she was like, or no, she had caught the goat. She was holding the goat. And I said, see, isn't that awesome? It's so much cooler to catch a goat than a chicken. And she was like, yeah, but it's much less satisfying. So anyway, it was super great. We got to hang out with some lovely humans who brought yummy food. And then there was the wood-fired pizza, which of course makes me entirely covetous of Bill's oven, which of course I could make. I even have a book about how to do it in my tiny yard. Whatever, I could totally do it. I could like hollow out my front porch. That would be amazing. I have a crazy giant brick front porch. I could totally hollow out like a bread oven in it. That would be awesome. Anyway, probably not up to code. Not that anybody would notice in this neighborhood. Whatever. But so it was so lovely. Oh, but so then the hormonal part of it is like the next day. Like it was so awesome to see my kid be like very much in the moment without a screen, like just enjoying herself and interacting with another kid that was her age. But it was lovely. Can I say that? Who it was? I think so, because I think Yarn Hoarder was there with her daughter Heidi, who is such a lovely young woman. And so it was nice to get to see them get to hang out and do crazy stuff together. What was I going to say? I hope it's so then the whole next day. I'm a human, right? Like, I know logically it is not useful to regret lost paths that never were or could never really technically even probably have been. But neither here nor there, just never were. So I know logically that is not an appropriate reaction, and that one should instead just enjoy the fact that we were able to visit the farm and that my kid was able to enjoy it in the moment, because she certainly isn't like coming home and being like, oh, she's just happy that she got to go. But I am a human, and so the whole next day I was just like, oh. Oh, my child's life could have been so much better had she had this to interact with. And, but it only took a day and I got over it. Okay, I kind of got over it. Okay, I got like 10% over it. But there may have been some welling up moments the next day as I was at the sewing machine, like, oh, I failed my child. Whatever. Being human, okay? Just saying. Sometimes it's rough. But so it was lovely and enjoyable and wonderful in all the ways. But maybe we should talk about some other stuff. Except how hungry I am. Because that's really what I want to talk about. Okay, so guess what? I totally finished my dotted rays speck of fade. Excellent. That's kind of how it looks. What? So you've seen all of it except for the chevron-y border. What? I really kind of went back and forth about this border so much, but ultimately I'm glad I did it. And I'm even glad of my color choices. Really, because I had this whole thing about like, it's too much contrast. It's too much blue tagged on to the end of all the screen. Whatever. It doesn't look like that when you're wearing it. Like there's that very different reality between the way a shawl looks like when it's all laid out or when you're knitting it in a big block versus how it actually looks when you're wearing it. And I'm very glad that I went with this combination because I like how it looks when I'm wearing it. And that's such a clever segue. I'm going to put that in right here. So here is my dotted raised speckled fade on my body. I found that I am not good enough to do, I like the way it fits, but I found that I went to the fiber event afterwards. I brought it with me because it's actually really warm during the day, but I brought it with me in the evening to just like wrap around my shoulder because I was wearing just a t-shirt, and I'm not experienced enough with it to put it on blind yet because there's my, oh sorry, that's not a real bra boob, sorry kids. Real, but there it is. So yeah, it was super fun to make. But so you can do it lots of different ways. You can make it shorter and wrap it up higher or whatever, or you could put like a shawl pin right there if you needed to like lock it in. But I think overall it's super fun. The other way I had it was like longer in the back too, so it wasn't quite as scrunched up. But yeah. So that's the shawl on my human body. I apologize, I forgot before I did that I should probably put a real bra on for you. Whatever. So I totally dig it. All the yarns are going to be in the show notes. I hope I remember to put the chevrons in there. But overall, I really enjoyed this pattern. Even though the bottom rows got crazy long, I still really enjoyed it. Because the great thing about the crazy long rows the great thing is, okay, sorry. That even though that, I think the last row before, and by the way, I did do the like extra large size or whatever, because I'm an extra large human. I think before you do the chevrons, it's like 500-ish stitches, and then the chevrons add a bit to it. But the nice thing is A, it's garter, which I can jam on, and B, well, striping also helps. But C, you just do that longest row once, out and back, and then the next row is like 18 stitches shorter, for example. It changes every unit or every section. Then the next row is 36 stitches shorter than the biggest one, and then it's 40. You know, I can't add anymore. 54. So even though those one rows are really long, you just get to feel very like self-righteous about how you did such a long row, and then the next one's not quite so bad. And then by the end, you're just like, oh, it's so much work to turn this so often. Because the rows are so short. That's why I enjoy it. I think I might try to record like a meta episode. That's one of the ideas I have, maybe. Is trying to record just project specific episodes. So I would like to start doing that occasionally. And that is all due to the generous people who are supporting the podcast via those donate buttons on the bottom of your mobile devices. Like if you scroll down to the bottom of the thefatsquirrel.com, or if you're on a actual computer on the right hand side. So one of the things I like to do perhaps is do meta episodes, like meta project episodes or something. So after I'm all done with the project and maybe it's kind of I was trying to say fester, but that's really not the connotation I want. After it's kind of percolated a bit and I've had it a little while, maybe, and hopefully worn it a few times, to do an episode that would be project specific. So there will hopefully in about, maybe 2 or 3 weeks be a dotted raised speckled fade episode where I'll talk about all the stuff. And that way, the theory is that not necessarily that you'll want to watch it in the moment, but that if in 6 months you decide you want to make this shawl, you can be like, instead of trying to figure out where I talked about it bits and pieces wise, you'll have one reference point of what my take on it was that you can go back and reference. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? I think it would make sense. But so let's just talk about tips and tricks I did this time or for this shawl. Okay? Okay? So the technique is the short rows, right? So you knit the very long row, and then the next time you're knitting, let's just go with our 18 stitches, right? So what I do is I knit my longest row, and I look at the instructions, and when I get to the end of my right side row, I see that next time I'm going to have to knit to 18 stitches before the last time I did a short row, right? So what I like to do in those is, for example, let's just I knit to the end of the row, I hold stitch mark. What I really do is just when I'm on the middle sections, like after the first row, I just hold the stitch marker in my mouth as I turn and do the next 18 stitches or whatever. But so I just go to the into the right side row, turn my work. In this example, I knit 18 stitches and then put the stitch marker, and then finish my wrong side row. Okay. And when I turn my work, I know rather than having to count, because especially when you get to the place where it's like 16, 18, 20 stitches that you're going to stop before the last turn, it's just tedious to count that many times. Most of the time I overshoot it, or I undershoot it and then I overshoot it, or you know what I mean? So it like wastes all of this time of counting and things like that. So having that stitch marker in there where I know that I'm going to turn is super helpful. So now I'm on the second row of this color or section or whatever. So I know that I'm going to knit to that stitch marker. I'm going to take the stitch marker off. I usually put it in my mouth. I turn my work, and then I knit my 18 stitches, and then I put the stitch marker in again, and then I finish my row. So that's the method that works best for me. Some people, or I have also, I think even one of his patterns, I think no, I think maybe I did that myself. One method is to, on that first wrong side row, is to put in a stitch marker every 18 stitches. Does that make sense? So basically you know that you need to knit on the next row, you need to knit to the last stitch marker, take it off and put it in your bucket or whatever, and then knit, and then turn it, and then knit to that stitch marker, take it out, put it in your bucket, you're done. The next time you're just going to knit to that stitch marker. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is put a stitch, knit. So now let's say, so you've knit to the end of the row, the very end of the row, you've gone back. Now you're on the second row of the section. You knit out to 18 stitches before you're going to turn, you put a stitch marker, and then you go back. And then the next row you knit to 18 stitches before that stitch marker you put another stitch marker, and then knit back. So that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it. I don't like that way as often because lots of times I just like my method best. The mailman came. He's never been here before, so the dogs have to freak out. So that's what I do. It's up to you. And then the other thing that I've done that was not necessarily in the instructions is I often have to knit on a much smaller needle than is suggested in the pattern. For example, I usually go down at least 2 sizes, but lots of times 3 sizes. And I don't know if it's because of that or if it's just generally how I knit, but I really think it's that needle difference. My I-cord edge is always way too tight for a shawl. Always. Not just like a little too tight, like it's significantly too tight. That's not a horrific thing because as an I-cord it's not as likely to break when you block it or something like that. But I would like the shawl to be able to expand to whatever it needs to expand to without being limited by an I-cord edge. So, that sounded really weird. So in the past what I've done is just added in a row of an unattached I-cord essentially. So, if you're working I-cord edge, you usually skip the last 3 turn, work 3, and then go on to yours. So what I'll do is just knit the first 3, knit the 3 I-cord and then take the yarn back and then knit those 3 and go on again. So you just add in an extra row. But those rows are not attached, and so they can create holes in your knitting. Also, I never have a set number, so I'm always worrying, did I put enough of those things in? I'm always trying to stretch it and figure it out because I've done it. I'm sure that you could totally do it scientifically and measure your gauge. usually I'm just winging it. And so I spend more time thinking about whether I need to add one in or not, and it makes the process less efficient. So what I did this time that really worked, I think, well for me, is that I did, much like on a shawl where you add in a yarn over that you're going to just drop, like on the edge you add a yarn over in that you know you're going to drop. I did that. Oh my gosh, how much time have I been talking? Ooh, my battery's almost dead. So I did a knit 3 yarn over, do the row, come back, drop the yarn over, and then proceed. I started initially doing like the yarn over between the first and second stitch of the I-cord, but it was harder to see, I guess, because that I-cord is firmer because of the way I knit, and it was more complicated. So it worked much better for me to do the 3 stitches of I-cord, do a yarn over that I know I'm going to drop on the return row. And that gave me a much more flexible edge, which I'm very pleased with. It looks good, and it was essentially the right gauge for what I needed. So, yeah, that. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that. There's a lot to say, right? Okay. So then, I showed you that. Oh, I am knitting on a pair of socks. I showed you those, so that's my other finished object. Okay, so the next thing I'm knitting on, I started a new pair of socks. These are in Dream and Color Smushy, right? Yeah. It is the Aqua Jet colorway, and it's 100% superwash merino, 4 ounces and 450 yards. And this pattern, I don't remember what it is. It's a free pattern, and I didn't follow it exactly because the pattern as written is written for a specific size of sock, like a men's 13 or something like that, which is not the size I am knitting. So I just basically scalped the stitch pattern from it. But again, it's a free pattern, so no biggie. But it's called, I'm very slow, it's the Hunger. They're called Syncopation Socks by Mary Henninger. And basically all it is an alternating 3x1 rib. I shouldn't say that. You work 3x1, knit 3, purl 1 for 6 rows. And then the next row, you offset it. So the next row, the purl will be in the middle of the previous row's 3 stitch column. So I'm just working a plain old cuff down. I think this pattern is also written for toe up. I'm just working a plain cuff down pattern with that stitch pattern slapped on. So there's that. So anyway, so it just gives it kind of like a little like lozenge effect. I don't know if you can see or not. Just gives it kind of a little lozenge effect, and also gives it a rib so that it's a little easier to give to somebody else if you're not exactly sure of their fit. And when it's stretched out, this is so much of my face. Are you on a giant TV? You're welcome. So when it's stretched out, you definitely lose that kind of lozengey look. So be aware of that. But whatever. It's slightly more engaging than a plain 3x1 rib pattern because you're counting those little 6 rows or whatever, and so it seems to go faster. And also that way you have these 6-row chunks, so you know it's easier to tell like your length. So it's easier to tell like how long your cuff is and things like that. So you're not constantly measuring, which I think makes the process more efficient. I don't think it makes it more efficient. It does make it more efficient. And then the last thing I have to show you before shameless self-promotion, I started Color Affection. Ow! I have knit another Color Affection, but I ripped it out because my edge was too tight. It was like way back when. So I have started this one. This is Hazel Knits in her Artisan Sock in the Candy, maybe? That's not that. In the Land of Sweets colorway. And then my color B is from a homespun house It is her Plump BFL Fingering in the Puddle Jumper colorway. And then my third color will be Madeline Tosh Daffodil. So I think it'll be, I've been in love with this like rose gold thing for a while now. So I think this is going to be fun. What do you think? I know. We'll see. And so I am doing a yarn over after the first two. I haven't knit on this in like a week. So after the first 2 stitches, I guess. To keep my edge looser. Because I did do a color affection, and I did it in like a heavier, I was almost a sport weight yarn in it, so it was huge. And then I had a tight edge, and it was woolen spun yarn, so it's not quite as strong as a worsted yarn, or worsted spun yarn. And then I blocked it too aggressively, and I broke this edge. Wah, wah. So this time that shouldn't happen. Yeah. Okay. So shameless self-promotion. There'll be an update a week from Friday, which will be the 28th, I believe. If I always say it wrong, it'll be on the website, the Fat Squirrel Fibers. But I believe it's the 28th. Now I have to look because I am unsure of myself. Yes, it'll be April 28th at 9 p.m. Eastern. This will be the update I'm showing you now. Just as a heads up, there will also be a May 12th update that'll be happening. I'll tell you more about that next week, but just on, bug in your ear. Little treat yourself Lady Day update on, well, pre-Lady Day, Lady Day weekend, on the 12th. And that one will be all floralies. And I don't mean like, that's not the right word. Botanicals is a better descriptor. But this one is crazy good. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. Just saying, maybe. Okay. So, there will be every size bag I make will be in this update. Let's go small to big. Okay. So there will, well, let's not do that. Let's go by theme. Let's go in a groupy group way. Okay. So first, there's going to be some skeps. What? You know you need a skep sock bag. So it has skeps and little bees on it. Aren't they fun? And the inside is yellow. The zipper is yellow. So that's a safe size. And then if you're like, I need a slightly bigger bag, I'm like, oh, no problem. I got you. Here's some more skeps. So this is the small wedge size. Aren't they fun? I dig it. Okay. And then, can you tell I'm excited about this next one? Okay, so in the Sock Plus bags, we have, what? All of the animal medals and ribbons and awards of cuteness. That's what you need. What? Do you see this fancy owl? Of course he has a medal. No joke. And inside this one is fun. And by the same designer. Are you ready? Just take a minute. Settle in. What? Oh my, what is happening? How cute this stupid fabric is. Can I just say, I think, I just had that moment of realization. So I've been like, I cannot make myself like a dress number one. I'm not a garment sewer at all. It is something I would like to work on. I would actually have to start working on it to make that happen, which I've never done before. But I do have that dress number one pattern. And I've been like, you cannot buy this fabric for that dress. I did buy some to make a crate cover for Annie and Olive's crate because I felt like that was something I could get away with. But I was like, I cannot make a dress out of this. I'm a giant lady. This is like a little drawery. Not that I can't. Okay, I can. I can do whatever I want. But it just occurred to me I could totally make a house dress out of it. Right? I don't have want to show the world how crazy I am. I just be crazy in my own house. So that might be happening soon. So I have it in this beautiful, like, grayish color. And then also in this beautiful emeraldy teal color. Because I had to have it in both colorways because it's amazing. You guys. There is an owl putting flowers in the deer's hair. They're having a tea party. They're fishing. They're riding on swings. Just saying. Oh, also, I don't have, this just came today because it was a little bit slower, but there will also be a regular. So this is the sock plus size. These are in the large wedge size. And then there will be regular sock sizes. I've gone a little crazy with sock sizes this time. Whatever, we'll see how I just. But there will also be these super fancy owls in the sock size. People who make art are amazing. And then continuing in the theme of, I want to use all the fabric that I've purchased for the shop to make myself dresses with. Not this one, but the next one that goes with it. So I also have a sock size in this guy. Right. It's like your watercolor sketchbook. You're like, oh yeah, I'm totally a person who takes my tiny watercolor palette out on my nature hike and I just soulfully sit down on a log that has been perched there and the fairies live under, and I just sit there and I just interpret what I see around me in watercolors. That's the person you are. I'm selling a lifestyle, people. But come on! Like, you need that rabbit. Right? But so then this is the one that I really want to have as clothing. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I had moments of intense mourning that I just didn't think about it as being clothing until I thought about that whole dress number one thing, and then I was like, why did I give that to the peoples? Obviously because dollars, but I'm just saying, I did have regrets. I don't have this one actually sewn into a bag yet because I'm a loser. No, because I needed a different color zipper, which I did not have on hand randomly, but it is like you're a naturalist, but your sketchbook is made of fabric. This is the person I want to be. The person who has the sketchbook. Okay, I'll just be me, but I can still pretend. What is happening? Look how awesome this is. Do you see the stupid fox? Right. There's like all the little stitchy bits. Looks like there's little stitchy bits. It is entirely impractical and not financially smart to do so, but I secretly want to stitch over all the drawn stitches on these project bags. I will not be doing that because, as I said, not reasonable, but I want to. If I had made myself a dress out of it, I could have. So yes, this will be in sweater and Aran sweater sizes. There's all this super cool owl, which is not on this piece, but I didn't show him to you because he's not as displayed to his awesome fullest, but he is also amazing. So anyway, I think that's enough of me yammering for this week's episode. Anyway, I'll talk to you next time. Bye.